joining us to review the papers this morning, we've got broadcaster Pete Price, also hoping to get PR consultant and crisis management expert Kevin Craig on the line as well. We'll just sort some gremlins out before we come to him. But let's bring in Pete first of all. Morning to you, Pete. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us so early on this bright and sunny Saturday morning. A lot of the papers still focusing on Philip Schofield, given his interview yesterday to The Sun and to the BBC. And The Sun going on his concerns of what he fears about if he's in the street, that he fears being spat upon.
Yeah, all the papers are covering this story, which is really scary, and the television as well. And the Mirror, I read about Alison and the tears for Philip. What's worrying me about this whole story is now it is a total witch hunt, and I just think it's absolutely dreadful. I saw the interview that Alison gave, and she refers to her mother and speaks about the Bible and he without sin, let them cast the first stone. She is weeping on television because she loves the man. I've worked with Philip Schofield. He's never been anything but nice to me, and I actually don't know what he has done wrong, and that worries the life out of me.
Well, the allegations are, sorry, Pete, but the allegation, the supposition is that by having a friendship with a young man, and being some kind of mentor and helping him in the industry, which then goes on to develop into a sexual relationship, some would look at that as having elements of grooming, and that's where the concern lies, isn't it?
Well, but we don't know. We don't know. We've only got two parties who were involved. I've seen the young man on television doing his report. He looks a very confident, competent broadcaster. And maybe Philip Schofield has helped him because he actually saw something within the guy that had a quality of talent. And then getting to know them later on, maybe falling in love with him.
I mean, do you think the fact that there is an age difference and the fact that you are in a senior position, that is something that should have caused you pause for thought? It's certainly something that he said that, in terms of the interviews that he gave, that he felt that was what he'd done wrong.
Well, if there is an age difference in relationships, then why don't we look at every single relationship? Because many, many men are involved with younger women and vice versa. So do we now start looking at everybody we work with and judging everybody around us? I mean, we shouldn't ridicule him right now. I think we need to help him. I feel, looking at his face, the pain and what he's going through is absolutely horrendous, and the media and the social media have been disgraceful. I mean, the world's falling apart, and there's terrible stories out there, and they're concentrating on this one man who has, love it or not, given an awful lot of joy to many people for many, many, many years. And somebody was commenting that he didn't know the names of people he worked with. Well, unfortunately, I worked at a radio station for 50 years, and I didn't know a lot of the names of the people. It's like they're nitpicking on every single thing. And if I'm working at a place, should I tell my boss that I'm having a relationship? Does that mean that everybody watching now, we all have to admit we have relationships?
Well, let's bring in Kevin Craig, I should say, Pete. A lot of organisations these days do ask people who work for them to declare it to HR if they do have a relationship. PR and crisis management expert Kevin Craig's managed to join us now. Kevin, what are your thoughts about this? Do you feel that it was the right time for him to do this interview? Or was it perhaps, a lot of people are suggesting in your industry, perhaps it was a little soon?
No, I would disagree with those, actually, and I think I would agree with a lot of what's just been said by Pete there. And I think, you are right. It's we might be going the way of America, where these sorts of employment agreements are becoming more and more common, where people sign up to not having relationships at work. Famously, in the last couple of years in the UK, the boss of McDonald's had to resign because he broke his own employment agreement and had a relationship at work. And I take the view that this was a very decisive intervention yesterday by Philip Schofield, and I think he came across very well. and I think there's more follow-up, obviously, in the Sun piece today that we've chosen. But I do think that there is increasing amounts of empathy for him, because when you get into the detail of the story, his big mistake was to not tell bosses at work and lie about it. But I've seen people in showbiz and politics come back from a lot bigger stories than this, and I feel the story may be turning in his direction somewhat.
And in terms of this morning itself, when we look at the front of the Mirror and Alison Hammond in tears there yesterday, a lot of questions about the programme. But do you feel it's pretty solid, that it can come back on Monday? You know, we're expecting Holly Willoughby to come back on Monday.
It's a great question, and actually the viewing figures since he came off screen have actually held up very well. And I think, Holly Willoughby herself remains a very, very strong brand. There's really interesting stuff behind the scenes about how she came away from the sort of go-to talent management agency in the UK, unlike most other stars on our TV screens. And I think two things. I think there is a future for Philip Schofield. I also think that This Morning as a brand is strong enough, with big enough viewing figures, to ride out this current crisis.
OK, let's move on to some of the other stories in the papers. The Daily Telegraph. Pete, you've picked that one. This story about the ministers, this secret unit to curb critics of lockdown. Well, it was a secretive unit, but was it really secret?
Well, it wasn't a secret. Well, it wasn't. The big thing with this particular story is there was so much out there against what was happening in the big wide world with the pandemic. And there was all these people who were anti-injections, anti-lockdown. So they had to have a plan of action in place. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't be where we were today. I mean, I had my injections. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going to go on, but I did what I was told to do. And hopefully, because it was an unknown world of what was going on, I didn't know what else to do. So they needed this in place.
I mean, Kevin, do you think we've slightly become quite polarised about COVID, haven't we? There seems to be it's a bit like Brexit. You either believe it or you don't. You either believe in injections or you don't. And it seems to me that the government was just trying to sort of say, well, these are the facts. But were these the facts as the government interpreted them?
I think you're right, and this level of polarisation, as you've implied, is terribly sad for me. I mean, I trained as a vaccinator during the pandemic, joined the St John's Ambulance Volunteers, worked alongside nurses in the NHS. You would not believe the amount of abuse that I've received online for that at points. And I think the government, as any government of any political colour would have done, had to try and do a very big public health job. And I think that we can too easily forget, as Pete says, the scale of what was being dealt with. And I think it's highly regrettable. And I think that, there was a public health emergency, and we forget that, Art Carroll.
Now, Pete, it's a big weekend. We've got the FA Cup final. We've got loads of massive gigs all over the country. But we've also got another rail strike. And the Daily Mail you've picked out is suggesting that there could be another year of rail strike mayhem. Is it affecting you much?
It has affected me. I've lost a lot of work because of it. 11 walkouts since last June, 11, and now they're planning more walkouts next year. We keep mentioning it, and we have to keep mentioning a pandemic. People are trying to get back on their feet, and they're not being helped by what's happening with the trains. The trains aren't in the best place anyway. The train from Liverpool down to Euston from Lime Street, they've had so many problems on that, so many problems since Virgin were binned off. And I just think it's absolutely dreadful what's going on. And this weekend, you've got this huge football match, which I won't talk about as an LFC fan. But we've got Beyonce, we've got Elton John, we've got everyone. And I've got 3 friends stuck in London now who didn't realise it was 2 days, the strike. It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous.
You don't have any sympathy, Pete, for the unions who are saying, well, yes, we have had COVID, we have had a cost of living crisis, and it's hard for those working in the industry.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we all need to make some money, and the more people go to try and get more money, the more the cost of living goes up. So it just backfires on us. And there are people working on the trains that do need a rise. The people that clean the trains get nothing. They need a rise. They need a decent wage.
Okay, Kevin. Moving on to the Times. This is a really fascinating and possibly really uplifting story. A blood test that's promising fast cancer diagnosis. I mean, it's amazing. It apparently can spot 50 types of cancer. This could be a real game changer for a lot of people, couldn't it?
It could, and it's a really big story. I've done lots of cancer-related campaigns over the years. My work, like all of us, have lost too many people to this disease, and this is the Galleri blood test by a US pharmaceutical company, Grail. It's been a test undertaken over 5,000 patients in the UK. It's early days. You often, as on the front page of the Times shows today, you get a lot of cautious voices. But what it says is that by spotting the DNA that's found in tumours, it could lead to a huge increase in the early diagnosis of some very prevalent cancers. And there's also speculation then about a further development of the technology, which might lead to similar developments for cancers, including pancreatic cancer, which are very difficult to diagnose early. So it's important and to choose some stories which are very potentially positive and uplifting, and the Times has gone very hard today with a very good story about that, and fingers crossed for what comes next.
I suppose the issue with it might be, though, if we're all able to have these blood tests, the pressure it would put on the NHS would be extraordinary, wouldn't it?
Well, it would, and there's another story we'll come to in a minute about inheritance tax and people fleeing the country for tax reasons. But you then have to go on to the question of how much does it cost us to fund public services that we all continue to rely on, and I hope that there's also then space for protecting the NHS, but also looking how we have to reform it. Whoever wins the next general election, things have to continuously change. What we ask of it gets different all the time, depending on how long we all live. And as technologies and tests advance, you can't stay the same forever. And you raise a very valid question there, but these things have to be funded properly, and we have to keep looking at that.
Indeed. I think we'll come to inheritance tax in the next hour, but before you leave us this hour, a bit of a lighter story on the front of the Daily Star, as lots of people watching are having their breakfast. It says, who the hell are these sickos? They're deviants, aren't they, Pete? What are these deviants doing?
Well, it's unbelievable. I mean, it was bad enough when they were actually deep frying Mars bars and Quality Streets and eating them, but this is going too far, putting your coffee and tea on your cereal. I have never heard anything so barbaric in my life. A wonderful cup of coffee, a wonderful bowl of cereal, and mix them two up. Sorry.
What's going on? I mean, there would be those, you said you could have granola with yogurt a few years ago and we'd have all laughed at them, but we're all doing that now. Pete and Kevin, thanks a lot. Lots more from you the next hour. Stay with Sky.